Hey, y'all. All right. Howdy, howdy. Welcome back to Night Shift with Andrea Up Late. Can you hear me now? Is going to be the title of this show. Night Shift is a true crime show. So if you're new here, you know why you are here and what you'll be listening to. That said, I am joined as always by my co-host, retired homicide lieutenant Brian Sanders. Brian, how you doing?
Yes, I'm wonderful, especially wonderful now.
now that we can be heard. We had a little difficulty at the beginning of this one, but we are back better than ever. Happy to see you guys on this lovely Tuesday night. If you are new here, Andrea Up Late, Night Shift, all that good stuff is a weekly live podcast. Again, it's true crime, and then we drop to wherever you listen to your streaming podcast, your platforms there. So your Spotify, iTunes, all of that stuff. We'll drop this episode, let's say tomorrow, the next day, that kind of thing. So give us a like, a follow, all the good stuff. So how's your week been?
Great.
Yeah,
we stay pretty busy.
We do stay very busy. It's been a busy week. Hey everybody. So if you are not watching, like I said, it's a live show, so we like to engage in the chats at the beginning a little bit, then we go through the case, and at the end we kind of engage a little bit more. It's free. Nothing we do costs money. Look at my bank account. I promise you it's true. That said, you can always log into YouTube, create a password if you don't have one, and then you can also hop in the chats. And it's a good venue to just banter or even ask questions. A lot of times we have some more specific questions come up in some of the more complicated cases that we covered. So he's probably not whited out. I just use self-tanner. So if that helps. But I think that we probably need to go on and get into it.
Yes, we do.
Davey, I did see you singing Creed karaoke, so just know that does live in internet infamy, and I saw it. so we can get started. If you guys did not join us last week, we had a tangled mess of a case, and I told you then that it's one that is very difficult to follow on a linear timeline. And it's because it covers a man and a woman who go by multiple aliases over the span of just a few years in multiple cities and have kind of different lives wherever they go. So the account from their friends and people who know them over the years is very different depending on where they were in their lives at that time. So you can do multiple storylines here and then all kind of wrap back around. So a very, very brief overview. Last week, we were talking about the girl in the picture. That's actually the name of the documentary about this same case. And it's about it comes about because of a picture that we haven't yet spoken on in this case of a man with a little girl sitting on his lap in like an Olin Mills type photo, if you will, like a professional type photo. And the child looks as though a child should not really look. Her face is fallen, but they're both dressed nice. They're both clean, and it's been a mystery. So fast forward, we started the show last week with a bystander happening upon a body on the side of the road of a woman who was still alive with groceries strewn about her. And this was in Oklahoma. They call 911. The woman gets to the hospital. Eventually, what's known as her husband gets to the hospital. Her 2-year-old child come. And then after 5 days, she succumbs to her injuries. When friends call her mother to let her know that she has passed because of her name that they knew her to be of, they realize the lady they call says that her daughter died 20 years ago. And now everything gets really confusing. Who is this lady? That wasn't her real name. In fact, her name that she went by when she was in the hospital dying was the name taken off of the grave of the little girl whose mother they called. So they'd used the name of a deceased person as one of her aliases. He, Clarence, at the time had multiple aliases as well. And now we've got her dead, the 2-year-old boy, and her husband. Okay. The 2-year-old boy goes into foster care for a brief time. Then after a series of events, courts determine via a blood test that this man is not, in fact, this child's biological father. They take the child out of the home with him. Things were not looking so good there. The child spends the next 4 years in a wonderfully loving foster home until fast forward to 6th grade, when the man, Clarence, who had been at the bedside of the dying woman, marches into the child's school, and at gunpoint demands the principal take him to this child named Michael. He kidnaps Michael, and no one has ever seen Michael since. So we left the show by saying, what is the identity of the woman that died in the bed, his wife, right? Where is Michael? What is maybe even his identity? And who is this man that's run? We find out that within hours of her being declared dead, this man, Clarence, calls the life insurance companies where he took out multiple life insurance policies on the dead woman, Tonya. He then is able to, after giving quite a few social security numbers, remember, many aliases, he stumbles upon the one that lands, the one that he had actually filed the claims with. He's able to cash them out to the tune of around $80,000. But in doing so, that brings up his real name. So it was the social associated with his actual government name. And that name is Franklin Floyd. And that's how we will be referring to him for the rest of the show. And so when authorities tried to get in touch with this man who has taken the child from the school, they run Franklin Floyd's name and they see a plethora of charges. They see also that he had in the more recent past gotten out of a halfway home. And because of that, they knew that he must have had prior charges, prior prison sentences. So they start to uncover who he is in an effort to also find out who this victim is, all while trying to track him down and find this kidnapped child. Okay. So we know that Tonya, the woman who is his wife, we know that when she was growing up, we did talk about her growing up, because when the news story breaks and goes nationwide about the little boy that had been kidnapped, an old Tonya's high school best friend named Jenny, her mother calls her to say that Tonya's on the news. And she said it's very strange because they're calling her a different name, Sharon, I believe it was at the time. No, they were calling her Tonya, I'm sorry. And they were talking about her husband. And so when Jenny turns on the news, she realizes that it is her old friend that she knew to be Shannon. And in fact, that was not Shannon's husband, Clarence. That was Shannon's dad, Franklin. So it just gets more and more bizarre as time goes on. So like I said, they live different lives depending on where they were. So she, Jenny, the high school best friend, is able to call authorities to say, hey, no, this was her name. So then they look into that name. That doesn't land on anything. So now we're going to start tonight with just kind of over in the side of your head. Remember that Franklin has little Michael, who is not his son, and he has gone off with him somewhere, kidnapped him at gunpoint from the school. And then we have the death of Tonya, and we're still trying to find out her true identity. All we know of from last show is that growing up, she was very, very bright. She wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. She wanted to go to Georgia Tech. She actually secured that full ride. And things fell off the rails when she got pregnant her senior year of high school. So without further ado, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's get started, guys. This is going to be the case of Suzanne, Sevakis, and Franklin Floyd. Again, we are going to be, from this point forward, this is going to be a 3-parter in total. So next week, we are going to wrap it all up. You can make it 7 parts, I think. But we are, from this point forward, going to be referring to them both as their real names. We won't be referring to the aliases any more than we have to. So Suzanne was born in 1969 to 17-year-old Sandra Bradenberg. When she was born, her dad was serving in Vietnam, and her mom divorced her dad while he was overseas. There's actually rumors of some adultery on her mom's part. I will say that the documentary for sure, and in part the book written about this, her biological mother's not painted in the best of light. I think nothing super egregious, but more flippant, if you will. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But either way, her mom divorces her dad while he's serving in Vietnam and decides to move herself and her children to a trailer park in North Carolina. So not long after that, a tornado comes and it rips through the town and turns their trailer over. So while they were all physically fine and safe from this, Suzanne's mother developed some mental instability. She later considered it to be PTSD. These were words out of her own mouth, the mom's mouth, Sandra. She blames all of these difficulties at this time on the tornado. But I would say, and I feel like you'll agree with me, Brian, that this is a grown woman with multiple children. I'm not saying that the tornado could not cause, even crippling paralysis during a storm, maybe moving forward or something like that. She was so shaken up. But we're talking to the point that she's now ready to give her children up for adoption because she can't mentally handle it anymore. She had an actual breakdown.
Yeah. I don't know about, I don't know. I mean, obviously we know natural disasters or even car wrecks cause people to divert certain things, or they won't cross bridges, or they,
Right.
I don't know about giving kids up though.
Yeah. So that's kind of how it is. So she, excuse me, by all accounts has what they considered at the time a mental breakdown and tries to go give the girls up for adoption there. But the agency she spoke with actually suggested she kind of just, they say to go to the church, go speak at the church, go talk to them, try to fight through your mental battle first before you give up the children. So that was their encouragement. And so she does. And while at the church, Sandra Bradenberg meets Franklin Floyd. Does this name sound familiar? So who is Franklin Floyd? Okay, we only know about him as an adult and all the stuff that's going on now. Who was he back then? And we need to talk about his upbringing a little bit to kind of put you in the right mindset about who this man is actually, as well as Suzanne. So Franklin Delano, you heard me right. The man's name is Franklin Delano Floyd.
I almost said Roosevelt.
I mean, as one would. Was born in Barnesville, Georgia. And this is another thing I'm about to tell you about his parents. They're not two people that I would think would be very politically affiliated or aspire to name their children after great historians and politicians.
Yeah.
But you can make up your own mind on that one. So he was born, Franklin, the youngest of 5 children, to Thomas and Della Floyd. Okay, so shortly after his first birthday in 1944, his dad, who was a cotton mill worker, an alcoholic, died from kidney and liver failure at 32 years old. So he was almost 2 years old, and I don't think it's worth not glossing over the fact that prior to his dad's death, though his dad was known to get very violent when drinking, which sounds like that was a constant affair if he died at 32, and would be violent with the belt. So Franklin, as a toddler, his siblings and his mother would often hide under the bed when his dad came home from work. He would, you'd get a belt to the face wherever he could land a blow. So he was not a good man at all in that sense. And his mom became a widow then at age 28, and she struggled to make a living with these kids. So they kind of go and share an apartment with her parents for a while. Finally, her parents get over it. They kick them out. There's kind of a succession, a series of not amazing parenting. And I don't mean because she couldn't financially support them. It's more so some of the decisions that were made, or some of the just kind of turning of the head, I feel like. So the grandparents were like, nope, get on with it. They actually encourage her to give all of these children up to social services. Again, Franklin was the youngest of 5. So he's 2, and he has 4 older siblings that his mom is now going to give up to social services. So what she does is actually goes locally to the Georgia Baptist Children's Home at the advice of the welfare agency. They say, let's take him to this children's home instead of us putting him in the foster care system. Okay. So I will say, there's some trigger warnings a little bit throughout this. A lot of it has to do with sexual violence as well. But Franklin had a horrible time. I think we talk about when people do really bad things as adults, and we kind of always go back and see what their childhood looks like. It's not a justification. It's never a justification, and they still need to be punished for their future crimes. But it does explain things sometimes. And sometimes it's just sad all the way around. It's just really bad. And I will say this is a case where Franklin's childhood is as tragic as then the things he commits when he's an adult. So he was bullied by the other children when he was little. They considered him to be smaller than most of the boys, kind of feminine and emotional. They say that later it was reported that he was routinely sexually assaulted by other boys in the home. Bad things happened in the bathtub. Bad things happened all over. He actually was once held down and assaulted with a broom handle by other boys there in the home. Once when he was like a teenager, a young teenager. He was caught masturbating, and they take his hand and dipped it in boiling water as a lesson. So just horrible, okay? Horrific things are going on. And he was there, you guys, he was there from the time he was 2 until he was 16. So not only formative years, his entire childhood, and for 14 years, this is what he endured. So over this time, though, his siblings, his biological siblings, are getting placed out. So one by one, his siblings are leaving to be adopted, and he's still there. So he actually is there until 2 years after his youngest sister left. So he actually finally got to run away. He was about 16 years old. He ran away. He broke into a nearby house to steal some food. That was another thing. They punished them with kind of lack of food, and hunger was one of their punishments. So he gets out. He gets in contact with his sister, Dorothy. Dorothy at this time was married and living in North Carolina. She had a couple of kids. He told her that, and she was told that criminal charges would not be pursued toward Franklin if she just would take custody of him. Okay. So she does, but then she finally has to kick him out. His behavior is not getting any better. So she kicks him out, and he travels then to Indianapolis. I mean, this is just the beginning of his life, you guys. He's gone through a lot. He's 16, and he is independently just traveling all over the place, really just trying to grasp, like, get a life, get something under his feet. So he decides to search for his mother, the mother that he loved, that he doesn't remember well because he was a toddler when she gave them up. And I think that he finds that, he hopes that he will find some, solace there, some consistency with his mother. But when he finds her, he learns that she had long ago become a prostitute, and she really didn't have much interest in reconnecting with him whatsoever. So it's definitely not the welcome that he thought he was going to get from his mom. So he is, yet again, emotionally pushed away. So she does help him, though, forge some legal documents. So she signs papers that allow him to go to California to enlist in the Army. He's 16, right? So the Army, he gets in, but 6 months into his service, he is discharged because they discovered that he was 16 when he signed, and the papers had been falsified. He cannot find his mom again, and he just, at this point, starts to travel across the country kind of as a drifter. He doesn't really have an education. He doesn't have anything in mind to do. And he really kind of doesn't have anyone to lean on at this time. Side note, his mother died when she was like in her early, I think 42. And was buried in a cemetery in Illinois. So let's talk a little bit before we move back forward to Suzanne and everything that's going on in the more current part of the story. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of his criminal history and what was found when his name is then looked at in the system. So in 1960, so at 16, this would be the same year that he broke out of the children's home. He broke into a Sears department store in Inglewood, California to try to steal a gun. Police respond quickly because an alarm went off, right? And so there was a shootout that actually took place, and Franklin was shot in the stomach. So he survives, but he had to have emergency surgery. He recovers, and he was then sent to a youth institution for a year. This was not a good place for him either. He then violated his parole and was arrested by he went to a fishing trip in Canada with a friend. It's kind of sad that here we are, and after everything I've just said, that's the only kind of pleasant thing it sounds like that's taken place. So in May of 1962, he would be 19 years old at this time. He returned to Hateville, and this was in Georgia, and found a job at the Atlanta airport. So this is something to think of, and whether or not it plays a part psychologically. After all of his traveling, he left that children's home in Georgia that was so horrible. He went to live with his sister in North Carolina. He went to Indianapolis to find his mom. He tried to join into the Army. He gets discharged and goes to California, has a shootout, right? Now he's managed to find himself all the way back in Hateville, Georgia, and he's actually not far from right where that children's home is. It may not play a part, but I have to find that. I feel like it does. I feel like a lot of things are going on right now. So this is where his really, really, forget stealing food and trying to steal a gun. This is where things have escalated quickly. Again, he's only 19, and there he goes to a local bowling alley. That bowling alley is sitting almost adjacent to the property of the children's home he had been at. And he abducts a 4-year-old girl from the bowling alley. he rapes her in the nearby woods. It gets pretty rough, but there were bite marks on her. It was very, very bad. And you've got to think the first time we know of him to have been sexually assaulted, he was 6. Mm-hmm. We don't know of anything prior to that, but you've kind of wrapped that around. He's now near this children's home, and this child is 4. Okay. So the child was actually found. She was alive. He didn't murder her. He was convicted, though, of kidnapping and child molestation. So he was convicted of that pretty quickly and was sentenced to serve 10 to 20 years at the Georgia State Prison in Reidsville. So I just always find that sentence interesting.
What was it again?
10 to 20. Not only is it very light, but it's such a like, if he serves 10, well, with good behavior is out in 7. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, that's such an interesting span of a sentence. Do you
Unless the minimum is 10 years, maximum is 20. So even with maybe good behavior, he's only doing 10 years. Is that right or no?
I mean, I guess, but we don't say 15 years or 18 years. We just give a decade's worth of a span.
No. When you get sentenced, you get sentenced your years, your months, really.
Yeah. Well, he got 10 to 20 of them. Like that's right, what all the sources say. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that November, he was moved then to a different, to like a state hospital. The attorneys wanted him to be evaluated. He has never, to this day, never ever admitted to feeling like he had any psychotic breaks or any mental illness or anything like that. So get this, you guys. So he was taken out for a medical errand. I think he was actually going to an optometrist or something very mild, like getting his eyes checked or something. It was 1963. He escaped there and fled to Macon, Georgia, and immediately goes to a bank and robs it. He robs over $6,000 of money from the Citizens and Southern National Bank. So now he's caught again. He's convicted of this robbery. He goes to a different federal reformatory at this point, and some time is added on to his sentence. Okay. For the bank robbery, and for the escape. All right. So then there's a second escape attempt. And this time he was transferred to a penitentiary in Pennsylvania. A few more years were tacked on to his sentence. Okay. So we went from 10 to 20. I think they added 15 on for the robbery and escape. And then I think 5 more on for the second escape attempt. So he's at this penitentiary in Pennsylvania, and this is where you hear about, child like predators and assaulters getting their payback in prison, and no less than that happened. In fact, it was to the point that he was almost on the daily beaten. He was obviously raped over and over and over again. And evidently it got so bad. I mean, it was the kind that, guards are turning heads kind of situation. Yeah. It was getting really, really bad. Mm-hmm. But he had raped a 4-year-old girl. And so that happened for so long. And so at one point he even climbed to the roof and kind of threatened to commit suicide. He said he was going to jump off. So they switch him over to a different prison. He goes back to Georgia. I'm going to get out of all of this mess here in a moment, guys. I just want to kind of give you a little bit of his background so we know what we're dealing with when we remember that this is the man that is on the run with little Michael. Mm-hmm. Okay. So he's transferred back to the Georgia State Prison in 1968 and befriended a fellow inmate named David Dial. And so he did anything he could at that point just to survive his time in prison. But that was in 1968. And so just in 1972, he was released from prison. So if I'm not mistaken, I believe he spent a total of barely 9 years in prison. Okay. And this is someone who already has attempted to rob a store to get a gun as a minor. So that maybe let's not count that because he was a minor then. Moving forward, he's got the rape and assault and kidnapping of the 4-year-old child, and then the escape from prison, and then a bank robbery, and then another attempted escape, and 9 years, guys. That's what it'll get you. Everything I just said total. Mm-hmm. So kind of here we are, and this will be a common theme. So you're going to see this go on a lot throughout this case. So in 1972, he was released from prison and sent to a halfway house. Okay. And so then 1 week after he was released from the halfway house, This was about 1 year later exactly when he got out of prison in the halfway house for a year. 1 week later, he approached a woman at a gas station and forced her into his car, where he attempted to rape and sexually assault her, but she managed to escape. She managed to fight back and scream, and someone was coming down the road, and she screamed and was able to get into a vehicle. She was able to describe him and his vehicle, and he was yet again arrested. So Franklin, convinced that guy, David Dial, who had been his prison friend, to go on and post his bond. So he actually gets bonded out.
Mm-hmm.
After all of this, he's bonded out again, and he doesn't have a hearing until June of that month, like 6 months later, right? Well, I mean, I know this is going to surprise everyone, but he didn't show up to that court date, which effectively made him a fugitive. Hence the start of the traveling and the aliases. Mm-hmm. And it worked for a long time. I'll tell you, it worked until, if I'm not mistaken, I believe like 1994 or something.
And he used the alias to get in the army, right? So
well, I think they forged his. I think they fudged his birthday.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that kind of gives you a background of his first horrible upbringing. I mean, it was tough to read about. There's so much more, as you can imagine, but it was really, really, really bad. And then just the start of his, criminal career, which escalated in violence very quickly. So let's fast forward to remember that lady Sandy, and she had the tornado and the trailer, and she's trying to give her kids up, but they tell her to go to the church. Well, she goes to the church, and this is where she meets Franklin Floyd. He's an upstanding man at that Georgia church. So she was crying, and evidently Franklin approaches her, and he asks her what's wrong. So when she replied that she was at risk of losing her kids, she's at her wit's end, he says, well, we can get married and I'll be their dad. And she agreed to it. They'd been together for a month.
Oh.
Oh, boy. All right. So not very long after this, money was tight, and Mom, Sandy, wasn't making the best of decisions. But either way, she goes to different sources, kind of say different things. But evidently, I think she's gone to a local convenience store and writes a bad check. And she is actually sentenced to 30 days in a local jail for this bad check writing. My assumption was it's probably not the first time, which is what gave her that sentence, the month. But either way, so she serves her month in the local jail, and she left her kids in the custody of Franklin Floyd. But yet again, they were married. That's now their new stepdad that they've just met. So she's released. She gets home. Her house has been fully vacated. No one's there. Her husband's not there, and her children are not there. So Sandy eventually found her two middle daughters, okay? But her, Allison and Amy were their name, and they were in the care of a local, like a church social service group. So she gets them back. She never finds her oldest child, Suzanne, who was, I believe, 5 at the time, or her youngest child, Philip. Okay? So she tries to file kidnapping charges against Franklin Floyd, but she was told by local authorities. Now get this, because anytime I've read this or heard this when researching this case, this always blows my mind. Of course, things are done differently over the years and in different locations. But again, this would have been 1975-ish. She was told by local authorities that as their stepdad, Franklin had a right to take them, and she could not bring forth kidnapping charges.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Like left the residence, left everything. And we know that he's given 2 of them up to a home. So when she can't find the other 2 or him, she tries to do that. What do you think about that?
I think off the top of my head, even in 1975, I would imagine like detectives and sergeants and people knew better. I wonder if that was...
I think it was because she was a woman, you think?
Well, it could be.
Well, there were just some weird, like, male-heavy, discretionary laws like that. Like, I don't know, kind of could get away with a little bit more back then.
And well, the only reason I thought, like a newer patrol officer, inexperienced or something, would say that, not being used to dealing with stuff like that, because even back then, you'd still have a living father, potentially, in that situation. But
well, I will tell you, and we'll talk more about it after we've like broken it all down. But her mom, over the course of the time, and then certainly in the documentary, there's no question that shade is cast on her for the events that immediately follow this, because she may have tried to file kidnapping charges, and it sounds like that's exactly where the try stopped in terms of looking for her other two kids, Suzanne and Philip. So, excuse me. So here we are. She comes out of jail. She's got her two girls. She's got Allison and Amy, but not the other two. So they can't find Philip, and actually his whereabouts remained unknown until 2019. This was 1975, something like that. 2019, a man came forward thinking he might be Philip. So they do DNA tests and confirm his identity. And evidently, according to his older sister, Allison, their mom had first claimed that Philip was dead. So mom tells the girls, I don't know if she thought that would be better for them to hear. I don't know. They find out later from social services that he was alive and had actually been privately adopted in North Carolina shortly after he was born. And there's not much more out there about him. The documentary doesn't really focus on him too much. The book talks a little bit more, but that's about it. But he kind of just went on to live. Hopefully, actually, as terrible as all of this sounds, this may have been the very best thing that could have happened to him as a child.
Yeah.
Because he was fully removed from any of this. And it sounds like just went on to live kind of a normal life from what I understand. So now Franklin has 5-year-old Suzanne. He may have given away the other 3, but he's kept her. He is raising her as his own. So this kind of starts to get us caught up to where we left off, like we just spoke about at the beginning. And so the lady Tonya, who was in the bed that got hit on the side of the road, that would be this Suzanne.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So little 5-year-old Suzanne is the one that we know. I'm going to get a picture for you guys. That started our show last week when we said, who is she, right? And it took this amount of time to figure out who she was. So this is the photo I'm speaking of. So that would be Franklin Floyd, and that is Suzanne, right around the same year that he took her from her mom when she was in jail. And so goes the start of him raising Suzanne as his daughter. All right. So little Suzanne, as she grows older, will tell people that her mom died when she was young, that she was hit by a car on a bridge. So Suzanne receives her scholarship. We talked about that, to the school of her choice, Georgia Tech. And she got the coveted position in the aerospace engineer program, but she became pregnant. Okay, so this is when she called her best friend Jenny and said, sadly, she can no longer go to college because someone had to stay home and, quote, take care of daddy. But Suzanne and the baby's father, her boyfriend Curtis. So Franklin was not the father of this child. Okay. We're going to talk in a moment about the things that Franklin did to Suzanne, but he was not the father of this baby. She actually had this boyfriend, Curtis, and they were going to run off. They were going to run away together and raise this baby. Again, she was in her senior year of high school. So they run off, but Curtis wakes the next morning at a motel that they had stayed at to a note from her saying that daddy has come to get her and they had to go. He took her away, and Curtis didn't see her again. So Franklin made Suzanne give the baby up for adoption, and then Franklin and Suzanne moved to Tampa. So we're going to see this pattern of an event takes place, and then there's a move and usually a name change, a move and a name change. And with databases not being like, well, there weren't databases. There weren't even databases yet, but it wasn't like computers and systems were talking to each other and those kinds of things. Yeah. And you go into another state, much less, even another city. But, you go across the country and you got an alias. It's pretty easy to kind of, at this time, in this day and age, get away with these things. So that's what they do. And like I said, they go on and move to Tampa. So here, Franklin had Suzanne work as a dancer. This was under the name Tonya Tadlock. This is when he began going as Clarence Hughes, okay? So she started working here in January of 1988. And during this time, she became friends with a fellow dancer named Heather Lane. Heather says that Suzanne was made to make $200 per night, as in by her father. Her father makes her make $200 a night, to the point that everyone at the club knew that her dad was like super duper bizarre. He was a weirdo. He would lurk around constantly. Her coworkers there say that Suzanne would be in a visible panic if it's nearing the end of her shift and she didn't have the amount required that night. So that they felt so worried about her that they would offer her parts of their earnings so that she wouldn't have to worry about going home. But they say that she would never take it. She would just work harder. So this is about the time things were getting like really pretty weird. So this club was called Mons Venus in Tampa. Now this was like a strip club that was super at the time, like high end, think athletes, celebrities, musicians would come here, and they would have these big lavish parties. They boasted that they had the most beautiful women in the world. And in fact, in the documentary, one of the ladies who used to be a dancer there said, you know, we didn't wear lingerie. We wore French lingerie. We wore the best, you know. And so I think it was just deemed to be kind of a high end, like I said, thing. And they said that she just walked around like this young, fresh, little quiet thing at first. Things do change, but at first she's just kind of a little bit more timid. And that's got to be, I mean, this is a girl who wanted to be an aerospace engineer, and got it, like got the program, was going to be able to succeed in this. And now she's since gotten pregnant, given a baby up for adoption, and moved out of the state to become a dancer at this like high end club. So they evidently had these private parties that I think they called millionaire parties. And some of the girls, the women that used to work there, explain it to be a situation where like these people with all this money would like rent out this, like the room or whatever. No sexual conduct takes place, nothing like that. The girls would just dance. They would take turns dancing just to a few songs each, and each earn around $500 or so. So it was a really good gig for them to kind of, when it was like a night like that, with those, celebrities, if you will, or the Millionaires Club. So one time Sharon actually gets, or she was going by Sharon then, but her name is Suzanne. Suzanne gets kind of in trouble because one of the men that worked there noticed her leaning against the wall outside of the door of one of those millionaire parties. Mm-hmm. And what he's witnessing is her essentially trying to suggest sex with one of the men who had come out. So she's offering services for $50 so that they would have sex with her. And so immediately he tells another, like a female coworker, like, hey, you got to go stop her. We don't do that here. We can't do any of that stuff. So the woman goes and speaks with Suzanne, who says that her dad wanted her to do this. And she said, it's fine. Like daddy, she calls him daddy the whole time, asked me to do this, and that he bought her condoms. And so she thought it was okay since he had done that. So they put a stop to that pretty quickly. During the time working here, as she has to change, as you can imagine, for her dances, she goes backstage, and some of the women that work with her later will say like that it was just really sad to them because they were starting to notice bruises all over her body. She was covered in bruises on her back, her arms. But Suzanne would never want anyone to say anything to Franklin. So he would like lurk around the strip club. He was just, they immediately thought he was, I think at least one of the times they would see him out in the parking lot and yell basically like, you piece of shit, like she needs to leave your sorry ass, like that kind of stuff. And one of the times he retorted with, well, I'll kill the bitch if she ever tries. So, and they knew there was already, whatever I told you, a 26 year or whatever age gap. And so, if she's 18, 19 at this time. So it was just, and they just really got the creeps from him. So either way, at this time, she becomes pregnant again while she's working here. Now they say that she was working herself. She was exhausted to the point that she had been known to, on more than one occasion, start to doze off while performing a lap dance. So she's working 7 nights a week, and she works through her entire pregnancy until the day before she gave birth. So she gives birth, and this was her second pregnancy again. But unlike the first pregnancy, Suzanne actually keeps this baby. This baby is Michael. Michael, the boy that we talked about that's still over here that we haven't solved yet, that got kidnapped from his school by Franklin when he was 6 years old. So this is Suzanne giving birth to Michael. So she has the baby. They stay in Tampa, and she continues to work. She befriends what everyone considered this beautiful young woman named Cheryl Camesso. All right. So Cheryl is kind of like, it's exactly what you would think. She was a dancer as well, but she like pulls up in a Corvette. It's 19, whatever it was, 88, you know, it's exactly everything you would picture. Like the frosted hair and frosted lipstick, but all the women had like wonderful things to say about her. Like she was a local beauty, but they all thought that she was like the sweetest thing in the world, and just, if not maybe a little naive to the ways of the world, she was very, very kind to everyone. And Cheryl and Suzanne became friends. So Cheryl, let's see here, she always kept a golden tan, and she was very bright, but her aspirations were actually to eventually leave dancing and become famous. She wanted to be in Playboy and other like publications like that. And her mom will attest to that. That was like really her call. That's what she wanted to do. So she and Suzanne become fast friends, and Cheryl would even go like visit the trailer park where Suzanne lived. They would hang out whenever they were not working. So, but keep in mind, Suzanne's had a baby. Okay. So she's got little Michael. So he's an infant, getting a little bit older here. And so Franklin would not allow Suzanne to be, I pause sometimes because there are so many aliases that I'm trying to stick with their real names, but Franklin would not allow Suzanne to be at the club ever alone. So he would come sit in the parking lot in his truck all night, or for the duration of her shift, every single night. If this doesn't show up as a red flag to anyone without knowing anything else, it is. So we're looking at the isolation, we're looking at the control over her. And he also would have little baby Michael, strapped in his car seat for the whole night in this truck. There are reports that maybe based on the behaviors that Michael exhibited once he went to foster care about being very upset near small spaces, that potentially Franklin could have maybe had him sometimes locked in a closet or a small space overnight when he went to sit in the parking lot while Suzanne worked. And so Suzanne was not allowed. If you ever wonder, why she didn't try to leave, because by now she is starting to talk. Like, so some of her dearest friends there at Mons Venus know kind of the things that are going on with her, at least the beatings. Okay. So she would have the means now. She's making a ton of money. I think at this point she was making like $1,500 a week, which this was 1988. Like she's, doing great financially in that sense, but she won't leave because she will not leave Michael, and she can never be alone with Michael. So he knows what he's doing, so Franklin makes it such that she can never be alone with him. She can't take Michael and just go to the store or anything. And so she refuses to leave Franklin because she's terrified to leave Michael in Franklin's company. Evidently, Michael was known to be very quiet, to kind of shut down in Franklin's presence, which he was always in his presence. But if she wasn't around, he was not a typical little boy in that sense. So let's go back to the friend Cheryl that we were just speaking about with the Corvette and whatnot. So as she and Suzanne become better and better friends, Franklin is enjoying Cheryl's company as much. By now, he had forced Suzanne to get breast implants, butt implants, and liposuction. It was pretty well known that she didn't want any of this, but he insisted, and he actually picked like a really, really low-end surgeon. So her friends there will even say that her surgery was so botched that it gave her like an odd appearance, and she actually had kind of just like an unusual shape where she had not prior. But even the doctors that then like examine her when she's in the hospital after the hit and run commented on the fact that like her surgery looked just really bizarre. Nothing looked quite right. So he uses the teeniest amount of money to get her a whole lot of big surgeries. And now she's endured that. So she's been pregnant twice, kind of forced to undergo these surgeries. So the more Cheryl hangs out with Suzanne and Franklin, the more Franklin becomes fixated on Cheryl. He calls the club nightly. I want to go back real quick because I think it's worth making the point. If you remember in episode 1, her high school friend, Suzanne's high school friend, Jenny, who saw her on the news when Michael went missing and, starts to recount everything and like their high school time together. Jenny will say that she told the terrible, terrible story of the one and only time she spent the night at Suzanne's house and how Franklin came in with a gun, made Jenny lie on her stomach and cover her head with a pillow, and he proceeded to rape Suzanne at gunpoint in the bed with Jenny on the floor. Nothing came of it. The next day, Suzanne basically told her, "We will not speak of it. It's just what he does. I'm okay. You're okay. It's over. It's just what he does. Don't tell anyone about it." And she actually didn't tell anyone about it until she got involved with the FBI, in this case in 2019. But Brian, you and I talked about, like, I don't even know the word, bold. What is the word that he is going to assume that he can do this, get away with it, and that she's not going to tell her parents. He's not going to be in trouble for it. Yeah,
I think at that point he's gotten away with so much. It's just kind of like, or this sounds weird, but it's part of the
the
routine.
Thrill.
Well, but I mean, like the conditioning, the routine, and just.
Yeah, but it wasn't the norm for Jenny to be over there. You know what I'm saying? That was her first and only time she went, because her parents would never let her go over there.
Yeah.
Because they weren't wrong. Their spidey senses were up, right? Mm-hmm. And so she did. But there is a little part that I didn't tell you last week, and I was going to wrap it back around, but I'll just go in and tell you now because it applies here with Cheryl as well. Some of the investigators think, when they look back on it, that potentially Franklin was considering taking Jenny as well, and then moving on to the next city with Jenny and Suzanne, because Suzanne had already told Jenny knew the rules. She couldn't call Suzanne's house. Suzanne could only call out, and she couldn't call her, but she did one day. And she was like, hey, I'm going to come over there. I'm going to come over. I want to come hang out. Let's whatever. And Suzanne was saying to her on the phone, "No, don't, absolutely do not. You have to stay there." And he's saying, "Give me that phone. Who is that? Is that Jenny?" And she's saying, "Don't, you have to stay there." Like, essentially, do not come over. And so it's all speculative, but some investigators take it, along with other information they have, to think that this could have been part of a plan. And Suzanne was trying to kind of save her there. Like, don't. And I think it wasn't much longer after that they split town. So that's a consideration. Either way, here we are in the Tampa, the Mons Venus, the Tampa strip clubs, all of that kind of thing. Michael's been born. Cheryl is around all the time. And Cheryl, again, wants to be in Playboy, right? And the more that Franklin is around her, the more he is fixated on Cheryl. So we may have another situation like that again. So he calls the club nightly that she worked at. Cheryl worked at a club, I believe, called the Dollhouse. Either way, it was a different club. He starts calling it over and over. Then he starts to call like dozens of times a night. And he's always asking, just to inquire if Cheryl is working or when she's coming back, when she's going to be dancing again. So Suzanne's coworker was getting super creeped out, and she refused to tell him anything. She would hang up the phone, or she would say, "I don't know when she works." She would never tell him anything. And she just knew that she shouldn't. So they knew, like I said, that he was a creep. So he would even go in like at Mons Venus to watch Suzanne dance. There was a time that before her implants, that he, in front of her coworkers. So again, that brazen, like, he knows that they know him to be her dad. Regardless of the weirdness they've done and the aliases, they know him to be her dad. And he grabbed her nipple in front of her coworkers and talked about essentially how nice they were going to be once he gave them the implants. I mean, it's like, so when I keep saying that her coworkers knew he was a freaking weirdo, like, they knew. Yeah,
I'm kind of surprised, hanging out in strip clubs and stuff like that, like he was doing, that some dudes
they almost did. There was another guy who like pushed him out one time. There was another, but then she, though, sometimes would be worried. Like, she had to have that job. She would suffer. So she needed them to kind of leave him alone so that she would not suffer on the back end of that when she got home. I think that's her abuse was the only saving grace there for him, because he would have. So he, again, was becoming fixated with her friend Cheryl. And before Cheryl, though, realized that he was quite so obsessed, she actually kind of was interested in what Franklin had to offer. So, Franklin told her he could get her into Playboy magazine. So when I said she might have been a little naive to the ways of the world at the time, she believed him. She was 18 at the time, so was Suzanne. So he offers to, what should I say, like ding, 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 it's almost every time, to take pictures of Cheryl. That never, if we're having a show and anyone mentions pictures, it's never good. Don't go have your picture taken, ever. So she does. She poses for him multiple times. He takes an array of photos over a span of, a while. And one time, actually, Michael had a babysitter over, this lady there in the trailer park that they lived in. And she recounts a time when she was watching Michael and put in a movie. It was like a blank tape that was supposed to have a different movie on it. And when she popped it in, she felt kind of sick because she sees a video of Cheryl and Suzanne. They knew it was being taken. And he was having them pose and dance together, and it was just gross. This was, again, for the babysitter, this is his daughter and her friend. And it's just more of the same at every turn. So there were some provocative positions and all these kinds of things. So Franklin continues his advances with Cheryl, but she's starting to realize that he's okay. He's pushing too hard now. So this comes to a head one day on a boat where Franklin tried to have sex with Cheryl. He continued to try to force himself, and she continued to deny him. And Franklin became enraged and began choking her. So we know that he has the violence. We knew about the rape at gunpoint with the daughter. We know about all of her bruising. He's a violent man. And we know his history, right? So he chokes her there. And what do we say about choking when it comes to a violent offender?
What?
Just that it escalates, right?
Yeah.
Usually we don't stop at choking.
Yeah. Sorry. Well, there's a study with a correlation to men who choke wives, women, domestic violence, but when they're doing manual strangulation and then later attacking police officers.
Interesting.
Very, very high probability. I want to say in the 80s to 90%, you can almost predict.
I wonder what that correlation is. What?
I think that's probably
other than just the race.
Yeah, probably just it's easy to be able to document or study that action of losing control and doing that. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, but sorry. That's what made me think.
Okay, so no, don't be sorry. That's actually really interesting. Maybe we'll have to do a show on that. So let's see where we were. You guys know about my notes here. That's why my left hand's always black from the ink. Alrighty. So one time on a night soon after the boat incident, a worker at the club that Cheryl worked at saw her in the parking lot. She was talking to Franklin through his driver's side through the truck window. The coworker witnessed Cheryl be punched in the face by Franklin, and he revved his engine as though he was going to, he kind of advanced upon her as though he was going to run over her. All right, so now we've seen, he tried to have sex with her. She turned him down. He choked her. Now he's punched her in the face. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then on a warm April night, soon after that in 1989, Cheryl left her dad's house to visit a friend. And she said she'd call him in the morning, but that call never, ever came. Her beloved Corvette was found abandoned in a parking lot, and within weeks of her disappearance of Cheryl, Franklin and Suzanne left town. Their trailer was burned down in what was determined an arson. Suzanne and Franklin first go to New Orleans, and here they get married. Okay? Mm-hmm. So now instead of Suzanne, her dad, and her son Michael, they are husband and wife who share a son. And they adopt the names Clarence and Sharon. And these are their new aliases. And then they make their move to Tulsa. So they've gone from Tampa, they go to New Orleans and get married, and now they go to Tulsa. This is the last city that Suzanne will ever live in. Because if you remember when we started part 1, we started with a woman lying on the side of the road after a hit and run in Tulsa. So what we still don't know is what happened to Michael. We don't know what happened to Cheryl Camesso. We don't know anything about even still exactly too much more about Suzanne at this point, and exactly what led her to be in the hospital that night. Was it the obvious hit and run, or was there more to it? So next week on our third and final installment of this crazy case, we will wrap it all up and get all the answers to those things. And there's even more. But holy cow.
I do wonder if, I'm sure there are plenty of other cases like that, but cases where someone's able to utilize aliases that much, travel from that many areas, and kind of, I don't know, I guess get away with what he was doing in a predictable pattern. The whole thing at like the strip club, it just seems like that. I don't know, back then.
She wasn't there that long though.
Yeah.
You know, I was kind of drawing out the story, but I mean, I think she was only there.
I mean, about a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess in the fugitive world, a year is a very long time.
True, but because he was a fugitive from the 19. Keep in mind, by the way, that during all of this, don't forget that piece.
Yeah.
He was still a fugitive from the law from attacking the woman in the truck that she got away. She wasn't raped by him. He tried. He had that court date set for 6 months later, never showed up. That was in 1973. So now we are in 1989. So 16 years have passed in that sense. Yeah, but he left there. That was when they were in, I want to say that. I don't know. I want to say that was in Georgia. And then with the woman in the truck.
Yeah.
And then all of this now at the strip club for that year's in Tampa.
Yeah. I mean, I know some people listening go, oh, he's an idiot. Like, fugitives always change their name and stuff. I get that. I'm just saying, like, when you sit still for that long and you're in an area doing very bizarre things like that and drawing so much attention, I don't know.
Well, actually, he left there. That happened in Georgia with the woman in the truck. He goes to North Carolina. Like, he flees and goes to, he's staying kind of in a region in the Southeast. I get that. But he's going from North Carolina, Georgia, flees, never shows up. So he's got 6 months of lead time anyway, because his court date's not because he shouldn't have bonded out to start with. That was kind of my point. Like, he was already an escapee. He was an escapee of prison once and an attempted escapee another time. Both times, the second he got out or the second he was even released from the halfway house, anytime he had a moment's free time, he was committing rapes, robbing a bank. I mean, big stuff. So the fact that he attacked this woman, and attempted a sexual attack, and then even was allowed bond blows my mind. But he was. So he had 6 months to just do whatever.
Yeah.
Until that court date. I mean, so he's not on their radar for 6 months anyway. Gets to North Carolina, starts going to that church because he's, it's a victim of opportunity, is Sandy. So he's an opportunistic dude. And so he marries her within a month, grabs these kids, offloads them, all three of them anyway, right? He's got a different name there. And then.
Yeah.
So, I mean.
Well, and in fugitive work, like, there probably was not a unit actively searching for him because back then, I mean, wow, that's a serious crime. Whatever resources that agency had charged him with that charge, they're not going to be traveling all over the country back then.
Back then, yes.
Yeah, because there was a lot of physical work on the phone.
Well, and keep in mind, he wasn't even just kind of piddling around. We know now that he was changing his social security number.
Yeah.
Like, he was fully taking on a new identity every time. And then that's kind of all it, like now everything so much more is involved. But then it was like, you have a new social security card and a number with.
Yeah. Most departments will tell you their fugitive unit, if they have an active fugitive unit, that's like one of the number one spots everybody wants to get to be able to go and just track down fugitives from a department. I know there was some kind of reference in here in the comments about moving from Georgia, being so desperate to leave Georgia to go to North Carolina. Right. I kind of feel like that's backwards. I think North Carolina is probably one of the better states someone could.
Yeah, get out of here, Michael.
Could want to live in. I mean, I do look rather pale tonight.
Did you just say you look rather pale?
Yeah, wearing these glasses, I got to talk like that.
You do have different glasses on. Maybe that's what's throwing everybody. I don't know.
They're horrible.
They're not horrible. They're just different.
Well, they're old and I can't stand them.
Then go to the eye doctor.
I do have to go to the eye doctor, and
I think we have different lighting too. There's just a lot of different stuff here.
Yeah, there's some craziness going
on. But next week we will wrap it up. I do like though that they're not, these shows are not. They've not been 2-hour shows because it's so much, and it's also like I don't want anyone to get confused on all these names and whatever. So I'm trying to kind of section it off as such. But so we got one more, and that'll tie it all up and make more sense, but it still doesn't. And the comments are right. He had a horrible, an abhorrent childhood. From 0 to 19, his life was absolute hell. Again, it doesn't justify anything that he's done, but it makes a lot of sense in the sense that, the man never knew. I'm not sure if he knew any ounce of love from his home to the children's home to then in prison. I mean, awful.
Yeah.
Or the way I don't know. Now bad things happen to people and they still don't turn out like this. I know that, but it was bad. I mean, there's plenty. They beat his feet till he couldn't walk when he was a little boy. They would swell so bad he couldn't walk. I mean, just bad stuff from 2 until 16. So, ugh. Let's see here.
Do you know what area in North Carolina? Did any of the research talk about that? Or
yes, but I have to look it up.
Oh, you don't have to look it up. I was just saying. I was just curious, if off the top of your head, if it was even mountains, Piedmont, or coastal.
Is it illicitappareldailythreads.com?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so yeah, y'all got to go to illicitappareldailythreads.com and check out some stuff. We've got some fun stuff on there.
Yes.
Actually, we got some more stuff to add as well.
Yes, we do.
And you can support us that way. There is a link. I hate asking that. It's a weird Spotify link that I guess gives the option to support the show financially.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't really know how to do that. I think if you just go to Spotify, you can see it. But just so you know it exists.
You can make comments on Spotify.
Oh, that's right.
People listening right now, even though we're YouTube live, if people are listening on Spotify,
Bosco's made some comments on Spotify for me.
Yeah, you can leave comments.
Yeah, so do all that.
That sounds like
good.
I'm old, but
so Brittany got a shirt, and she says she loves it. You got the Highway one or whatever, right? I think it was called Highway. It's a night shift shirt, I think. I think that's what she got. Yeah. Heather Vick has one because she won something. What did she win? Oh, Halloween. Yes. Halloween guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was wearing your shirt yesterday. One of them.
Yeah, I like that one.
Television one.
Maybe that's what she has.
Like a scrambled. No, I think she got the high one.
Okay, yeah, I do like that one.
It's like the 80s type kind of color scheme.
It is. Let me see. I was gonna see if we had any more photos of. Gosh, that photo. This is the picture that Dad, chose to put in the yearbook. No. Yes, it was. Of Suzanne. Nasty thing. Gosh, he looks like a mean mama jamma. If you guys are listening via Spotify or iTunes or anything like that, we're just kind of showing some pictures. I'll drop all of these to Andrea Upload on Instagram, or at least anything that I haven't already. We've got this as a coffee mug on the on Illicit Apparel. You can get that. I want to make this one a coffee mug. Do we like that, y'all? If you're watching. Oh, and there's a new Disruptors logo too. I forgot. I didn't put that up here, so we'll show it to you at some point. All right. What are you thinking?
Me?
Yeah.
I was trying to catch up on comments. I can't.
Oh, I can't. Hang on. I'm trying to take that picture off.
I can't type, or I can't even read.
Type and talk.
Listen to what you're saying. Yeah, type and talk, and I'm all scrambled when I try to do it. I feel like I'm getting older by the minute. I'm like, dude, put some comments on Spotify.
What are we congratulating him?
Oh, like he's been married, I think 10 years, he said.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations.
That's what it said.
He said on the 16th. Yeah, 2 days.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. He's saying that, well, I guess if you write it here, you're okay if I say it, but just that his wife had a bad childhood, but she's not bad, doing bad things. And you're exactly right. That doesn't mean that somebody for sure is going to. It just, sometimes when we look at these crimes and you go back and see what the childhood was, it's like, well, it can make a little more sense. Okay, for instance, I had some, we were lifting weights and I had a Ted Bundy interview on. I do listen to other things than just terrible, horrible things. But it was not long before, it was this afternoon, and I just wanted something I didn't have to like think about and listen to. And he's being interviewed, and I think it was his last interview before his execution. And, he's talking matter of factly. If you've ever listened to any of the Ted Bundy interviews, especially as the years go on, he's very matter of fact. He's not fluffy about it. He's not boastful. He's not like weird and reliving it. Like, he's very eerily normal to talk to. Yeah. And he said that, the interviewer was saying, about your childhood and growing up and your parents and your peers and all of these things. And he was like, no, like, I grew up in a good family, had a good mom and dad. We were financially stable. Didn't have any assaults on me, or, no one hurt me. No one traumatized me. My siblings were fine, and he just goes on about it. And then he proceeds to say, or the interviewer asked, so you had a pretty normal childhood, like everything was fine. And and what did Ted say? He said something like, that's kind of one of the strange parts about this whole thing, that. Yeah. And the way he worded it was weird, but it is true. It actually made it so much scarier, right? Like this guy that we're talking about today, Franklin, when I hear that horrible things happened when he was a little boy and continued the rapings and the beatings of him, all through his teenage years, until he then starts doing these things. It's like, well, horrible, but I get it at least a little more. Mm-hmm. Ted Bundy's the wild card in that sense of like, he didn't have these traumas. He just did it.
Well, and
Jeffrey.
I'm gonna get to that.
Sweet little baby Jeffrey.
Gosh, all the aliases, but yeah, she worked
Suzanne.
Dancing. Yes. Mm-hmm. Like you said earlier, all these bad things have happened to her.
Right.
She's dancing, but also, wants to have a normal life, go to Georgia Tech, get into a career. I think
that was before she was dancing.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah.
Because that was when she was in high school. Yeah, that's true. But she was still, by the way, he was still raping her then. Like, that was when she was in high school, going to wanting to go to Georgia Tech. She was living alone with him as though her mother had died. He was doing all of those things then too. Yes.
Yeah. I think with him, all those things happening, he probably also had some other issues going on, obviously, that we'll probably dive into on the next episode. But when you said Dahmer,
sweet little baby Jeffrey,
it is, I will say, and we talked about this, but there are books written on Dahmer. Robert Ressler from the FBI, he was one of the original profilers. I think he's written 2 or 3 books, but one of them actually goes in depth and does like a transcription of an interview he did with Dahmer. He built a really good rapport with him and learned quite a bit. But when we were listening, just even stuff the other day, he's much different than a lot of those guys are just so.
Yeah, and the news made it, of course, so salacious and the cannibalism and okay, but like when you strip it down and like listen to him talking, his is very different than Bundy. Dahmer does the you pointed out and made a good analogy. He references his sickness or his urge to do the things that he was doing, almost as though like it's a cancer, something that he actually can't help. It happens to him, but he doesn't say it like poor pitiful me. He says, no, I need to be off the face of this earth. Like there's nothing, because when he's asked what could have been done had you not been arrested, what could have been done to stop you? And he said, oh, I can't imagine there would have been anything. And they say, did you because he said he felt evil at these times when this happened, and he felt pretty like yucky inside his head. And they said, did you like feeling that way? He says, well, no, but I can't help but to do it. Like, and it's a very different, his brain, the wiring there is very, very different. And he understands it well enough to know that it was terrible and he shouldn't have done it. And he also knows that it's like a weird control over him.
Yeah. And he was, sometimes organized, sometimes disorganized.
He was all over the place.
I don't know. I think people get so like a visceral reaction, which I fully get that, about his murders and what he did. But when you listen to him talking about it and then start to understand, I could be wrong, but I don't think we are. And the fact that he is talking about it like this overwhelming compulsion, he gives in, and then later it's like I don't need to be here. Somebody needs to kill me, take me out.
He said when they arrested him, and you guys, I'm sure some people are familiar with the case, but just at the very end of his span of criminal activity, Jeffrey Dahmer's, that is, it's because the last victim who actually testified in court got away. He was able to get away, get a cop up there. The cops come up, they go through his home. They immediately had an odor that they smelled. We'll talk about that, and it's because I don't think it's what you think it is, actually. And when they go to him, they say, he said, oh, it's in the bedroom. Do you have a weapon or what? And he said, it's in the bedroom. And when they go in the bedroom, that's when they first stumble upon the Polaroids, the photos that he had taken. And the photos were, some were of intact, alive men, but mostly it was, kind of during the course of the events of the murders and the dismembering and whatnot. So obviously they go on and put cuffs on him because they're like, oh, holy shit, like what have we found?
Yeah.
And he said, I mean, when they say, did you try to panic or go? And he said, no. I mean, I realized then that there's no sense in, he said, the best thing I can do now is help the police identify all the victims so their families can know, and it's time for me to go to jail. And it's wild to hear it.
Yeah. I think that, and I mean, everybody's talked about, monsters, Wolfman, whatever, being based on, cases that people could not explain why a villager shows up, dismembered or whatever. I mean, it would be very hard 100 years ago or 200 years ago for the average person to understand that these things go on.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think he is that type of that Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing of duality and just, horrible, absolutely horrible.
Or even like Ed Kemper, before we wrap it up, because his always is interesting to me too. And a lot of the people who interviewed Kemper said, oh no, I liked him. Like, I mean, meaning on the surface, developing like relationally, interviews and things like that. Because he also was not, there were the one, like the John Wayne Gacy's, like, I don't think you could sit in a room and like enjoy is such a strange word, but kind of learn from your time with them. He was boastful. He was kind of a brat. Like I don't know, he rubbed me the wrong way, like personality wise, and that in that sense, aside from all of their terrible crimes.
Yeah.
Bundy was fine. I wouldn't really want to talk to him too much. I'd sit around and talk to Jeffrey all day long. But Ed Kemper was one that, and they say that, like, he is so articulate about breaking down his own insanity or his own whatever it is. And very long story short with him is he hated his mother. She was not a nice woman to him. And she hated men. And so he uses that kind of. But eventually, after all of these killings of women, he kills his mom. And then they say, what's the difference between you? Or they say, how many people like you do you think exist that are killing this many people, doing this many things that are so abhorrent in nature? And he said, oh, it's a whole lot more than you realize. And they say, well, why do you think that is? And he said, oh, well, because they just haven't given up yet. Like, I came in out from the cold because he got himself arrested. And he says they're just not tired of it yet. And he articulates his as such that when he finally killed his mom, he looked at it like the whole time, every time he killed a woman, he was killing his mom. So when he finally killed his mom, it's kind of like, when people have a wart removed and they say to get to the source, like once he killed his mom, he was done. Like that was effectually what he was doing the whole time in his brain. So it is interesting to hear, themselves talk about what they've done and what they consider the driving force behind it. If they can talk in a way that, if they don't have like the psychotic breaks and things like that in the conversation. So I don't know. A lot of wood chipper talk in this show. We got one that says, good grief, wood chippers are great inventions. Pretty sure that's when we're talking about the crimes of Franklin and Floyd. When we referenced that Suzanne was making $1,500 a week, and Michael Hendricks says that $1,500 a week in 1988 is like $739 million today. I feel like that's an accurate calculation. All right. Are you ready to get out of here?
Unfortunately.
And be done for the week? We do. But we love y'all, and we appreciate it each and every week. Thank y'all for coming back. And I'm not even going to try to get that off the screen. I can't do it.
But we are counting the days until summer.
Oh, aren't y'all?
On the beach. Yes.
Where are y'all? Hang on. So I know Brittany's on the West Coast. In case anybody listening wonders, she's okay. She and Heaven, like also Sandbag Queen, both live on the West Coast, and I'm not like doxing them. They've mentioned it in public. I'm pretty sure. Sorry if you haven't. No, they have, but they're doing okay with those fires going on. That's not exactly where they are. But everybody else that's in the chats, is anybody like in like crappy like snow, like a lot of it? Because it was like 39 here yesterday, and it's way too cold. For me. I can't.
Yeah, I'm ready.
It's time. All right. Well, let's tell these lovely folks good night. Until next week, you guys, again, you can like, rate, review, subscribe. All of that is free, y'all. I know that you are not. I know where you are, Falk. I said that you were on the West Coast. And that you were safe from the fires. But yeah, we appreciate y'all. Hit all those buttons, do all those things, make your comments, do whatever. It really does help. YouTube views, I've noticed, have like tanked, which is fine. I mean, mainly it's an audio podcast, so all those other numbers are doing great. But keep that in mind to push all those buttons. You can also follow Brian at Brian Sanders Disruptors on Instagram. You can go to his website, which is
disruptorsofbriansanders.com.
That one. And you can always, if you're someone who listens but don't have social media, you can always send us an email if you have questions or suggestions for a show at andreauplate@yahoo.com. So we make it pretty easy. A lot of our stuff has all kind of the same names, so it makes us easy. It makes everything easy there. Marine's Blood said he's got about 16, lots of snow. What, about 16 inches?
No, degrees, I think.
Ooh.
Right? I don't know.
Ooh. That's not good.
Hopefully dropping an episode tomorrow that I will be recording at the same time and then dropping it probably immediately.
So then I won't tease it in case it gets rescheduled or something.
We can tease it.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, it's Matt Browning and his wife Tawny. They work with A&E and do Secrets of Polygamy TV show and Escaping Polygamy. So I think most of what we're going to talk about tomorrow is that whole entire subculture.
It's going to be a really good show, guys.
Yeah, with the order out in Utah and what they had going on. Basically human trafficking, just a lot of crazy stuff. I wasn't quite aware of that.
Yeah.
Like, and how it's tied in with a religion and that sort of thing. But they go and interview people who were directly in some of these families in the order. And that's what the series documents. But we'll record tomorrow and I should be able to drop it.
Yes. Yeah, that's going to be a really good one. And they are engaging. You've had them on your show before when you're talking about some other stuff, some of their other backgrounds. So this is going to be, I think, more of Tawny, the wife's background, and then moving forward to the show that they have on A&E now. So it's going to be a really good one. So then, like he said, he's going to record that tomorrow and hopefully drop it right after. This show will be dropped on audio platforms tomorrow as well. And again, if y'all have any suggestions or anything like that, we're just busy little bees over here working behind the scenes doing whatever we can. Falk is asking if it's going to be live, and my assumption is no.
No. I'll record it and drop it tomorrow on Spotify, Apple, all that, and then just upload it on YouTube as well.
Yeah, I don't think Brian's not a big fan of. He doesn't mind doing night shift live, but I don't think you love doing your own live show. Is that right?
Yeah, I've never done it. I've never done one live.
Yeah. You know what I've never done? An episode of The Disruptors.
I know. I want you on the show. I think there have been a few times I've been like, hey, a while back, hey, let's go record. No, let's do something else instead of going and recording an episode.
Okay, you made that suggestive.
No.
Just in general.
Just in general, we would end up going and doing something else.
Yeah.
Like you would just like avoid it.
I don't avoid it.
No, but it is true. We like to just hang out and go do other stuff and stay active. So.
Yep. Well, we love y'all. Hit all those buttons, do all that stuff. Give us all the follows, and do check out Illicit Apparel, dailythreads.com. There's some cool stuff on there. And again, we'll have more stuff to come pretty soon. We've got to get rid of. There's Christmas stuff on there. I think we got to get rid of and kind of weed through. But either way, we will talk to you guys soon. And I guess you can go on and tell the people good night.
Good night, everybody.
All right. Until next Tuesday or next week, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Night, y'all.